I knew that I had to let it go. I thought that when my mother passed, I was just going to be able to, shut the door on the whole thing. And I wasn't able to do that. And my friends talked to me about it, and they said, you know what, you should stick in. This has been a project with you now. You're 15 years into it now. You should see what you can do with your pop. And I was like, oh, really? And I was exasperated.
I held the weight of the world in my hands, but I let it go. Now I understand. I'm awake, I'm aware, I'm alive. I'm living my best recovered life.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I am so excited to be with everybody for a brand new episode. Look, I was lucky to get my buddy Megan on today. I really look up to Megan. Megan has long-term sobriety. We were having a conversation at a social event, and we were talking about the power of forgiveness. And I love his story because so many of us will get and stay sober, but we just won't go there with forgiveness. We just won't do it. And it hurts our sobriety. And, recovered life is all about having our best recovered life. So I'm so thrilled I was able to bring on my buddy Megan. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Dame.
Ah,
Ah,
so glad that you're here today. Look, you have long-term sobriety, over 3 decades, right?
yeah.
Over 3 decades. Amazing. Tell us a little bit, just give us a little synopsis here on you and your sobriety journey. You got sober when? How long has it been? Just to kind of set the stage so people can get to know you.
Yeah, I got sober in the late 80s. I followed my brother in, and I'd come off a suicide attempt, and I had nowhere to go, and I ended up at a place called the Victory House in Burbank, and it was indigent men, which meant none of us had nothing. And it was a far cry from where I come from. I've been in front of the camera for a while, and my career went to crap, and I went through the windshield of the car. Whatever happened, it was time for me to get sober, and I wanted none of it. And being in Burbank, I first meeting I went to, it was a couple of days before Thanksgiving. There's a guy there, and he's a greeter at the door, and he says, "Hey, how you doing?" And I went, "Back off, will you, man?" And the guy, said, "I'm sorry, you're new, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Look, we got a coffee bar over there. I'll save you a seat next to me." And it was like, "Yeah, I'll be sitting next to you." I don't think so. Anyway, I'm a couple of days sober, and I haven't been sleeping at all. And it's Thanksgiving morning. I get up. I want out. I just want out of my head. And I left the Victory House, and I was walking through Burbank, and I came back to Victory. Everybody was gone. There were 85 of us in the place, and there were two guys watching the Twilight Zone marathon on TV. And I sat down with them, and we're watching William Shatner, trying to get the gnome off the wing. And down the hall, I hear, "Who wants to ride the sobriety bus?" I look down the hall. Nobody's loud in the place. It's security. But you're allowed to step up to the top of the staircase and scream down the hall. 1988. That's security. So uh, I looked at the guys who were having none of it. I looked down at the guy. He looked pitiful. I said, "I'll go." And because I had pity that day, I'm sober today. So pity's part of it.
And I know who you're talking about. And by the
Yeah.
way, for all of you, just to paint a picture here of when they say in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, no matter how far you slide down the scale, that facility, I've been to that facility, it is pretty far down. Uh, it is a shocking, like, I am here and I don't have other options. So the fact
Yeah.
that you are sober, how many years now? How many years sober?
36 years.
36 years off taking that
Yeah.
bus ride. That is amazing. Now, I got to tell you, we were talking personally, and I love the story that you had about your dad about forgiveness. And I'm going to tell you know, we've talked about how we'll get sober. We do the best we can in early sobriety. We work the steps. If we're in 12 step, we have therapists, we go to therapists, we do this. We do it and we do forgive somewhat, or many of us would not be here, but we don't fully go there either because we don't know how to forgive or we just won't really go there. And I know you had kind of a crazy relationship with your dad. You were very close on one side, and on the other hand, you were not. And I wanted to talk with you about this real quick. Many people do not do well in the full forgiveness and really experience the healing power of forgiveness because they don't really know how to let it go, especially with family members. Can you tell us a little about your relationship with your dad real quick and about why it was tough for you in early sobriety to let that go, but as you moved through your sobriety, got into a place where you were able to? Can you tell us a little bit why it was tough?
Sure. My father was bombastic. He was a Broadway trained actor, had a really loud voice. And when you're 4 years old and he's screaming at you and he says, "Well, why don't you say something?" It's like, I can't talk, while I'm peeing my pants, and he was tough, he was just tough. He was Midwesterner, gone to, New York, came back out here, did a lot of TV and stuff. You guys would recognize him. Anyway, uh, I didn't want to be around him. I was 16 years old and I got out of the house. My brother had come back from Nam and he said, "I think we're going to have to send your brother to the loony bin for a while." I was like, "What? What?" My other brother was gone at that point, and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he needs some help." And I went, "Okay." And he said, "Well, how do you feel about it?" And I said, "Well, I think it's a really nasty time for you to ask my opinion for the first time in my life." And he said, "Well, if you feel like that, I don't know how you can live here any longer." And I said, "I don't either." And I got up and I left, and I did not have to live with my father after that. And that was great. Uh, but things go on. I love my mother, and I could have just gone without ever seeing my dad again. That would have been fine. But I love my mother. She's like one of the great salts of the earth, and uh, we went through a lot of stuff. And when I was working the steps, we were getting to making amends, and my sponsor said, "Well, where is your deal with your dad?" And I said, "Well, I don't, I don't think I have anything to ask him, to say I'm sorry for." And he said, "Well, it's not about that." And I said, "Well, what?" And he said, "Well, what's your part in it?" And I said, I don't have a part in it. What? I'm 4 years old. He's screaming at me. I mean, what kind of?" And he said, "How old are you?" I said, 34. And he said, "Okay, well, you carried that for 30 years. That's your part of it." I was
Yeah,
like, "Ooh."
it's interesting because when I look back at forgiveness now,
Mhm.
and after you have time, when you look back at forgiveness, Megan, like you were saying about it's harder to see your role, and then you see it a little bit that you're still carrying on, and then later, like I know for me, I was willing to give up part of that then on my fourth and fifth step, but not all of it because I don't know if I really had the ability. I don't know if I had the awareness. Does this make sense? Because a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people will listen to this, Megan, and they'll say, "Well, I did the best I could when I did the steps or went to a therapist. I let go as much as I could. I forgave as much as I could, but I don't know if I could have forgiven anymore, but yet still in sobriety." And this is why I wanted to have you on. Still in sobriety 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, we still sometimes will carry it, still have carrying it. Did you find a time where you were like, dude, I thought I did the work with this, but I'm still carrying this?
Well, because I'm sober a while, and I things they change along the way. I stay sober. I do the stuff that we do in sobriety. I mean, I'm of service, and I hear other people talk about their lives and what they've done the whole time. And it's like certain things occur to you after a while. And my parents, after I got sober, had moved up to Portland, and I'm still living down here. My brother's still living down here. Not the guy that we threw in the loony bin, but the other brother. And he, we're going up and visiting on a Christmas morning, up there, and it's really icy. It's really terrible. And we get up there a couple of days before Christmas, and my brother, who's kind of into it, says, "You feel it?" I said, "What?" He said, "It's about to happen." I said, "It was going to be, always Christmas morning was the game, the day that the games came out and everything started to happen and shit with the fan." So uh, we started playing Risk on Christmas morning, and my father was like, "Rrr, rrr," all over the place to me. And I looked at him and I went, "Hmm." Mike and I had talked about it before, and he said, "What do you think we should do?" And I said, "Let's do nothing," so that we didn't, let into it. And they came at my brother, and my brother was like, "Oh, okay." My nephew is not sober. He's just a normie kind of a human being. He was 14 at the time. He was picking up on it. He went, "Hey, Grandpa, it's like," and my father had no wind in his sail after that. And so that was a couple of years in. Another 5 years later, my mom passes, and I've got to take care of my pop because she asked me to on her deathbed. And I wasn't going to. I thought I was going to be free of this whole thing. And she said, "You got to take care of Dad." And he was starting to get a little dementia, little stuff happening.
Had you noticed, Megan, that you had thought you had maybe forgiven and moved on, but
No,
during this process,
no, no. I knew
you
that I'd been
know the whole
holding
time.
on. I
Yeah.
knew that I'd been holding on.
How is that affecting you? How is that
Well,
affecting your life?
well, I got to still live with it. He was still the big bad wolf. That was what I was carrying that whole time. It's like, why am I doing that? But I can't get out of it because I'm
Yeah.
entrenched in it. I just don't see it for what it is. Through the course of the next 5 years, my father ends up down here. He's living out in the motion picture place out in Woodland Hills. We got him in there, and I'm his caretaker. I'm my father's caretaker. After all this kind of stuff, my brother wants nothing to do with my dad, but I'm here, and we get into it. And I'm my father's caretaker, and now he's got full blown dementia, but he's really a charming kind of guy to everybody else in the world out there, and he's keeping up his facade. But you know what? I'm not feeling bad for doing any of the stuff that I'm doing because I've been doing service in the group and in the 12 steps for a while, and I knew at that point it never hurt me to help somebody else out, and I got to help my dad out, and I was fulfilling my mom's wish, and so I'm there, and right before the end, he has one day where they've been sick. They had a shutdown. Yeah, we'll get into that time. They had a shutdown at the place a couple of weeks in a row because when they had the flu, they would shut the whole place down. And I didn't get to see him for a couple of weeks. He doesn't know what's going on. I get there the next Saturday. He says, just sitting at his computer. And I said, "Hey, Dad, how you doing?" He said, "Oh, you." And he started on me, so nasty, stuff you can never say to another human being. He said it, and he was loud, and he was everything. And after about 5 minutes, I just got up, and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I don't have to listen to this, old man." He said, "Well, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out." So I had to live with that for a couple of weeks, talked to some friends about it. They gave me some counsel. And that's what happens through this whole thing. You
Yeah.
find the people that when you have counsel.
Did you
I
just
did.
feel that you were living with more because I always say, I don't know if you've ever seen that Robert De Niro movie, The Mission, Megan,
No, I haven't.
where he is, he's
He's a priest, right?
Yeah, he becomes a priest, but he's a warrior first, and he's carrying around all of this armor with him, even as a priest.
Mhm.
And finally, one of the other priests cuts it loose, right? And isn't that the same thing with not forgiving?
Yeah,
I mean, it's like the what you have, the sack of shit you have to carry around
yeah.
is overwhelming. I mean, how does that feel like? And now he's not doing well. He's still acting out. You have to set boundaries, obviously. What does that feel like?
Not
Carrying
good.
that around.
Not good. I wanted to stop, and a friend of mine gave me an idea that I got to follow with. A couple of weeks later, gave him a call on the phone. He loved my ex girlfriend, and I said I'm bringing Kim out. He loved that, and we didn't talk about what was going on. We went out, and ate, and then the next week I was going to come out and see him myself. And I called him and I said, "Hey, Pop, I'm coming out by myself this week." And he said, "Uh, oh, okay. Look, that thing we had a couple of weeks ago." I said, "Yeah." And he said, we should never do that again." I thought it was not cool. Wow, he's gotten it. He said, "But you were more wrong than I was." And it was like, I got it. I got it. And here's what I really got through the entire thing. It wasn't about him changing. It was about me changing. And I had changed. You know what? I didn't count on him to give me the juice that I needed any longer. And I got it. I got it. And you know what? I loved him. He passed a couple of months later.
I love that. I When we come back from this quick break, Megan,
Yeah.
I want to talk about how you did that. The spiritual process, the feelings, the actual nuts and bolts of it,
Yeah.
of how you forgive and how this has changed your life, more importantly. So when we come back, more Megan, more about the healing power of forgiveness.
Recovery isn't just a journey, it's a lifestyle. And now, you can wear your recovery with pride. The Recovered Life Shop is live, packed with merch designed just for people in recovery. Whether it's a hoodie to keep you warm, a mug to start your day right, or a statement tee that lets the world know you're living your best recovered life. Need a little humor in your recovery? Grab the Resentment Some Assembly Required t-shirt. It's a classic. Ready to take massive action? Start your day with the Massive Action coffee mug. Or keep it simple and spiritual with the Chopwood Fetch Water Trucker hat. Every piece is designed to inspire, start conversations, and keep you connected to your recovery journey. And the best part? Every purchase supports great content like this and spreads the recovery message. So, go to recoveredlife.tv and click on the Shop tab now.
And we're back. I've got my buddy Megan on. We're talking about the healing power of forgiveness. You know, Megan, you were talking about your father kind of having a little breakthrough and softening up a little bit. And sometimes that happens with people, and sometimes it doesn't. I want to talk about how you actually got to the place where you were able to forgive. Was there a time? Was there like a demarcation line? Or is it an unfolding? I mean, I think that's what people want to know. Is it an event? Is it a bunch of different events? What was the thing when you just said, enough of this? I'm just going to
Yeah.
forgive and move on, no matter what he does.
That kind of happened at that Christmas, couple of years sober. I mean, I said, I'm just going to, but I didn't know how to do it. I'm kind of lame, and I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box. And it takes me a while to pick up on what's going on. And I knew that I had to let it go. I thought that when my mother passed, I was just going to be able to, shut the door on the whole thing. And I wasn't able to do that. And my friends talked to me about it, and they said, you know what, you should stick in. This has been a project with you now. You're 15 years into it now. You should see what you can do with your pop. And I was like, oh, really? And I was exasperated. I'll tell you when it happened. Like the day that he passed, he was out of it, and I had my niece and nephew come out and visit him that day, and I said, you're gonna have to say goodbye to Grandpa. And they're in their late 30s at that point, and they give him their best, and we all talked around his bed for about 4 or 5 hours, and it was just time for us to go. And I kissed him on top of the head, and I said, Pop, you won. And that's when I let go. Because the truth of the matter was, he had, he, you know what? He hadn't been given the gifts that I've been given. And I never thought that I would call, what I got in sobriety a gift until then, and my father made it possible for me to see what the gift is in forgiving, because you know what? I don't have bad feelings for my dad. He's a story, and it may be able to help somebody else, but I got nothing but love for my dad. I see all the old stuff that he did on TV. I get a good feeling about it, and I don't have to feel I don't have to carry that thing. My brother, on the other hand, never forgave my dad. And you know what? That's his. I don't know. I don't know how he feels about it. That's up to him. That's his business. He's a sober man. He can do whatever he wants to do. But I know that he didn't have a good feeling, and he didn't come to the memorial for my dad that a whole bunch of his friends ended up coming to. He missed all of his friends, and it was like, that was kind of sad. Uh, there's man, I got lots of stories of forgiveness because I was really resentful before I came in.
You
I got
know,
high
real,
school.
real quick, I want to ask you this because I think a lot of people feel that things have to be okay for there to be okayness, if that makes sense, right? And I find that really the healing power of forgiveness is I'm okay even if it's not okay. Because although this turned out good for you and your dad kind of came around at the end, for many people, I know I've had the experience, I didn't have that experience. Okay, I didn't have the experience where people kind of had a realization or whatever. There's been times in my life where that has not happened, right? And can you talk about that a little bit, Megan? Because I think people feel they have to wait for the people, places, and things to be okay,
Yeah.
for them to be okay. And I find it just spiritually doesn't work like that. I have to be okay with it.
Yeah, which is why the 12 steps are good for a guy like me, because there's a revisitation of them over and over again. And when got to when my father passed, finally, I had done what I could do. And I knew for certain that I had done what I could do. And I didn't always do it, with glee, uh, but I did it anyway because I watched the people around me. I heard their stories, and people told stories about how they got through crap by actually walking through it. And it's just, man, it seemed like it was going on forever with my dad, and it was part of life. And I was like, really? I guess I've learned to accept life on life's terms, and I didn't ever think that I was going to do that. I didn't ever foresee any of that coming. I I had one real quick one. I had a drama coach when I was in high school. I was with her for 3.5 years. You know what? She didn't really care for me. Loved my brother, but was not crazy about me. Just kind of, you know, stood me. And I worked hard. I mean, I worked really hard, and I never felt like I got my due from this teacher. And I, carried that afterward. I had some success as an actor, and I saw her. I go back to the drama festivals, and I judge at drama festivals, and I would see her from time to time. She said, "Wow, that was really great," kind of, and I was like really dismissive of her. She was like, whatever, you know, and I got sober, and she was on my list. She was on my resentment list. And way back there, I didn't know what I was going to do, But I talked to a couple of friends that I'd gone to school with, and they said, yeah, they validated that it wasn't great between the two of us. But that's all I got after a while, and I badmouthed her in my sobriety for a while, and then it kept coming up. It was like she was the last of my of the stuff that I'd written on my original inventory. And I looked at it and I said, well, what am I going to do? What can I do? Where's my part in this? And I could not find my part in it at all while I'm bad mouthing her. I still can't see where I am in it. And I just finally wanted it to be over. And uh, I didn't know what I tried to get a hold of her on Facebook. It wasn't possible. Social media, she wasn't returning anything. So I was at a drama festival a couple of years ago, and she's 91 years old. She's working at tabulation as I bring my ballot up. And she looks at me and she says, Megan King. And I said, Vic Francis. Oh my God. And we talked and I said, I've been trying to get a hold of you for a couple of years. I kind of wanted to take you out to lunch. And she said, really? I thought you hated me. And I said, I don't. I don't. That was then. You know what? I'm different. She said, really? And I said, yeah, yeah. She said, well, you can catch me on Facebook. Okay. Tried to get a hold of her on Facebook. She didn't return anything. I went to another festival, saw her again. She said, well, what happened? You said you were, I said, yeah, I tried to get a hold of her. I couldn't. I said, is there any other way I can get a hold of you? And she said, yeah, here's my email address. And so I emailed her and set up a lunch with her. And as it came down to a couple of days before the lunch, I said, so I'll pick you up, and because she's 91, she's not driving. And I didn't hear back from her after we had been communicating pretty well. And I got that I'd been kind of ghosted, and well, what am I going to do? And I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? All I wanted to do was make an amends to her. I guess a writer an amends, or wrote her an amends. Pretty clear on what I, had been, where I had been, and what I had done. And she wrote me back immediately, and she said, "Wow, she was kind of amazed." We went out to lunch. We sat with each other for 3 hours, and just I don't say that we were great like old friends. We were like something different.
Yeah.
It was something different, and she and I have a relationship now. Uh, and the truth of the matter is, I did forgive her because you know what? I found out where I was as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. You know what? And my part was that I was this brash, rowdy little punk, and I could accept the fact of what I was, and I just got to take her out to lunch. We had barbecue for 3 hours. It was great. We talked
Love
about
that.
all kinds of old stuff. It was great.
Megan, final question here, final thought to people who are listening to this. I know right now there's somebody listening to this and says, Damon and Megan do not know my story. Maybe they feel they're tragically unique. And they say, I just can't quite forgive. I just can't quite let go enough to forgive the person in my situation. What would be your message to them?
Uh, it's a weird one. I'm not I don't quote the big book or any of that kind of stuff, but there is a passage in Alcoholics Anonymous on page 552 that talks about 14-day prayer to get rid of resentment. And I remember looking at it the first time, going, "I'm not going to do that. That's crazy, man. I don't. Why would I do that? And I started doing it for the first couple of resentments, and that is for my father. And it's how I eased and was able to go up and even visit them. Was that I had done this 14-day of prayer, and it kind of backed off the way that I asked for that my father have everything that I want for myself in my life. Like I really wanted that. It says you don't even have to mean it, just say it. I tried it. It worked. It's a beginning, and so I would say try a forgiveness prayer. Try and just give that person everything that you want for yourself whether you mean it or not, try it. And it's a beginning. That's the problem for people like me, is that you know what? I already have the answer and it ain't working. So I'm going to keep with it, and it's like that. Where's the growth in that? So I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I think, after another 36 years, I may have it.
You're going to have it down. Megan, thank you so much. Guys, if you're Recovered Life Plus subscribers, I'm going to have an after the show with Megan. And you guys have to tune into that. Very powerful, Megan. I think resentment, forgiveness, it's such a huge, it's a stumbling block for a lot of people. Everybody goes through it at different levels, but the healing power that you get out of it is amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. Super
Thanks for
appreciate you
having
having me on the show.
I really appreciate it myself. Thank you very much.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best